Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Football. Today, we're going to be covering Week 11 of the NFL season and preparing ourselves for Week 12. Got some MVP discussions, some championships and Super Bowl discussions, as well as some other really big news happening in the National Football League. My name is Andrew Howe, joined alongside Xavier. Xavier, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to talk about another really exciting week of football. Let's start by going through week 11 really quickly. Of course, we had your Eagles taking down the Commanders in what was a very exciting comeback at the end, as well as a couple of other games that were decided by 1 point or less, and a lot of games that went down to the wire. What was your favorite game of the week?
My favorite game of the week was the Bills versus Chiefs game, and of course, it was one of the biggest games this year since people wanted to see because the two top contenders people thought were Bills versus Chiefs, so it was a big decider to see who people would pick for the team to make the Super Bowl, Bills or Chiefs.
Yeah, the Buffalo Bills beat the Chiefs 30 to 21, giving Kansas City their first loss of the season. A really impressive game from Josh Allen, I would say, specifically some of those plays towards the end when he ran the ball really well. Khalil Shakir had a great game, and really, I think honestly could give Josh Allen some MVP nods a little bit as well because I think he outplayed Patrick Mahomes a little bit, especially towards the end of the game.
Yeah, definitely. And that rushing touchdown, you just putting the offense on the shoulders. I mean, definitely carrying the offense and just overpowering Mahomes in a game where Mahomes didn't really have a great game, and Josh Allen came in with the clutch, winning by 9 points.
Yeah, I mean that rushing touchdown was awesome. Some of the plays that set it up before as well. On the other side, the Chiefs looked okay, I think for the most part. Although I know they're not going to be undefeated, obviously, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, my game from Week 11, I think had to be Sunday Night Football. Bengals taking on the Chargers. The Chargers winning it last second. It seems like it's a very similar case with the Bengals every single week, Xavier, where their offense looks really good. You know, they didn't look good in the first half, obviously, as LA has one of the best defenses in the league, but they were about to spark a big comeback. They tied the game and just needed a stop to force overtime at the very end, but the Chargers and J.K. Dobbins said no.
Yeah, that was a crazy comeback, and I mean they're down by what, like 21 points, and then Joe Burrow came with the comeback, and that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins connection. Joe Burrow looked great out there, and I mean the defense just couldn't hold up. I feel like it's the same story every single week. The defense always just kind of sells them the game, and that Hail Mary pass was close, but Derwin James ended up knocking it away.
I know. It was impressive that even with like 18 seconds left, they almost had the opportunity to tie it again. But just not unfortunately happening here for the Bengals, who now dropped to 4-7. Their chances of making the playoffs really running out. I mean, it's crazy to see when you have Chase Brown, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase all having great games, and they still aren't able to pick up a win. There was a couple of missed field goals by Evan McPherson in this one, but at the end of the day, the defense just has to play better for Cincinnati.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's definitely the problem because their offense is honestly one of the best in the league. And you got all around solid. Joe Burrow's playing amazing. And then you just got the defense just letting up
Yeah.
34 points. And I feel like really mad if I was Joe Burrow right now.
Definitely. I mean, you can tell when he's like talking in the press conferences sometimes how he's a little bit frustrated with how the games have been going. But I mean, it happens for a lot of people. You know, it happened for Justin Herbert and the Chargers for a lot of years as well, where they would play really well. Justin Herbert would look great, and they just like lose at the end of the games in the fourth quarter. So good to see the Chargers playing really well. They're all of a sudden a pretty big contender in the AFC. Two more games I want to talk about really, really quickly before we move on to our next topic. Ravens losing to the Steelers. What were your thoughts about that one?
I feel like the Steelers somehow seem to always beat the Ravens. And even when they're like basically always the underdog. And I think like it's just their curse. And I mean, of course, the Ravens were favored to win in this one, but Steelers just came on top. And I mean, like Russell Wilson had a good game, and like just like the Steelers somehow always find a way to beat the Ravens.
Yeah, I'm gonna give a big shout out to Chris Boswell, who kicked 6 field goals and went 6 for 6, accounted for all 18 points. That's the second time this season where he's done that for his team, in a win. And the Ravens on the other side had Justin Tucker, and he missed 2 field goals again. And if he just made those, they would have won the game. I mean, obviously there were other problems that maybe you have to look at. Lamar did not have himself the best game, but Justin Tucker, man, what happened to him?
Yeah, and I also the Steelers need to improve their red zone offense a bit if they have 6 field goals taken by Chris Boswell. But I mean, you at least came on top, and I don't know what's happening with Justin Tucker. I mean, this has just been his off year because we thought he was gonna be like, oh, make everything automatically, and then now he's missing 2 field goals a game. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, definitely. One last thing I want to talk about, Seahawks taking down the 49ers. I remember this was one of our big games to talk about, and they, won at the last, kind of towards the end of the game as well. Geno Smith running in for a touchdown, similar to Josh Allen, and the 49ers unable to finish off the game at the end of that one. Any quick thoughts about this and the NFC West race as a whole?
Yeah, and I mean the NFC West is really close, but Geno Smith is just clutch, and he had that like adrenaline, so he's like super fast all of a sudden on that last drive, and it kind of seemed like him and Josh Allen like it was in they're in like the similar positions, and both of them came in with the rushing touchdowns, and both had really good games.
Yeah, I mean that division race is going to be super interesting to watch because I felt like that was a game that the 49ers were going to win to get themselves back into the lead. Didn't happen. So, congratulations, of course, to the Seahawks. They're back in it a little bit. Let's move on to our next topic right now, which is just about some of the big favorites that we have in the league. Obviously, the Chiefs were the big favorite, being undefeated, Xavier, but now that they lost to the Bills and the Lions just destroyed another team as well, they're looking like unstoppable. I mean, who are your like really big Super Bowl favorites at this point in the season?
Right now, I'm gonna say the Lions just because of how powerful their offense is, and their defense is also very good. And like it literally showcased it with that 52-6 win over the Jaguars. And I mean, they seem kind of unstoppable with having only one loss, but that was just like before, and now they're like really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really impressive. Even again, with Aiden Hutchinson getting hurt against the Cowboys, everyone was like, "Oh no, this might be the end of like a really good start for Detroit." But they have just continued to roll. Of course, they made a couple of additions in the trade deadline, but it's all been their offense so far. I mean, Jared Goff also just being incredible. Montgomery had 2 touchdowns. Amon-Ra had 2 touchdowns. So I think I would probably say the Lions at this point as well, because it's not just their record; it's by how badly they're beating some of these teams. The Jaguars, they're not necessarily a good team, but winning a game 52-6, that was their biggest win, I think, in franchise history, and that was the Jaguars' worst loss in franchise history. So, really good stuff from them. I would say the Bills look stronger than the Chiefs right now, especially after acquiring Amari Cooper. Shakir's really turned himself into a star, and on the Chiefs side, they just have too many injuries to deal with right now. Even Harrison Butker went on the injured reserve, so I'm a little bit worried about them, especially towards the end of the regular season. But once they get to the playoffs, I think they will still also be a big favorite.
Yeah, I definitely think they're still a big favorite in the playoffs, and of course, Allen always beats him in like the regular season, but Mahomes always beats him in the postseason, so that could end up happening. But I think the Bills are looking better just because Mahomes isn't the same person as he was last year, and the offense isn't as powerful. And I just looked up something, and the Lions have a point differential of 159 points.
Oh my gosh. Is that the highest? That's probably the highest in the whole league, right?
Yeah, that probably is.
Wow. I mean, that shows how good they are. It's just really, really impressive. I mean, those are the 3 best teams I think you could probably argue in the league. Is there anybody else that you're putting in that same tier, or after that, do you think it drops a tier? Do you think
Well,
the
as an
Eagles belong in there a
Eagles
little bit?
fan, I think they do kind of earn a spot, but as an Eagles fan, I still think they're probably the worst of that group, but they could sneak into that S tier.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Eagles a little bit too, because they won on Thursday Night Football. It was a big comeback. I know, Xavier, it was probably a little late for you at the end of the game. Did you see the Eagles comeback went live, or did you have to go to bed and while they were losing?
Oh, I watched when they came back.
I mean, it was a pretty big one, and you know the big winner in that fourth quarter, of course, was Saquon Barkley, ended with 146 rushing yards, two touchdowns, just another awesome game from him. And now that the Eagles are 8-2, after maybe it was a bit of a slower start, I think some conversations are opening up with MVP, and Saquon Barkley is probably the biggest non-quarterback in terms of MVP favorites for the offensive side. Do you think that he has a chance?
Well, he definitely needs to keep staying consistent, but of course he's the best running back in the league, and I mean I think he is top five in MVP candidates after just like he just on a tear with like 150 yards per game, and I still think the league will give a bit of an edge to the quarterbacks though, so it might be tough for him to actually become the MVP winner.
That is true. However, I mean, there's not a ton of quarterbacks that are like that have had like really great seasons all the way through. The three that I'm thinking of right now would be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson a little bit, although he struggled over the last couple of weeks, and then Jared Goff, who had the five interception game, but the rest of the games have looked really good. Are you kind of thinking about those three people specifically, or is there anyone else that's on your mind?
Yeah, those three are definitely, I think, the top three. I think Allen stands both those all those three stand a good chance, but I think Saquon's number four in that list. If he ends up having a historical year, doing even better than he's doing right now, he could stand a shot.
I mean, I remember Derrick Henry at the start of the year was really impressing, although he's maybe slowed down a little bit. I think Saquon has had the better season overall from week 1 to week 11 so far. And so if he keeps it up, I think we're going to start really seriously having those conversations. If speaking of people who had really great rushing games, I just want to give a quick shout out to Taysom Hill and the Saints as well, who had one of the craziest stat lines ever, Xavier. He was the first ever player in NFL history to have three touchdowns in a game while also having 125 rushing yards, 50 receiving yards, and 10 passing yards. He had 18 passing yards. And then he also had an interception and a fumble loss. I mean, one of the weirdest games ever, but that's just what happens if you have Taysom Hill on your team.
Yeah, I mean he is just a wild player. He can like basically play running back, tight end, and quarterback, which is kind of insane.
Did anybody in your fantasy league have Taysom Hill? I was thinking about picking him up and I decided against it. And then that week he had, I think it was 42 PPR points as a tight end.
I think someone had him, but they benched him, so it must be.
Yeah, because I feel like he's only good for like one of those weeks. The next week he has like probably 3 points or something. So always a little bit of a wild card. One more topic before we move on to Week 12 games to watch, and that's going to be about Saquon Barkley's former teammate Daniel Jones, who the Giants announced they are benching him for the remainder of the season. Now, obviously, the Giants have the worst record in the league. They just lost to the Panthers in Germany. So something probably had to change, but this is a guy that the Giants were paying $40 million a year for, and now they're going to have Tommy DeVito start in his place for this Sunday's game. What do you think about this decision?
I think it is definitely a reasonable decision, like considering that they just lost to the Panthers and stuff, and now they're 2-8. They're eliminated from playoff contention, so they're just be experimenting with Tommy DeVito, but he could repeat or do even better than like the stretch of games that he had last year, and I think he has a little potential, and yeah, I mean, paying Daniel Jones instead of Saquon seemed kind of crazy, but I guess they just stuck with that decision.
I know. I mean, you know what's a funny stat? Since Daniel Jones signed his Giant contract, Tommy DeVito has won more football games for the Giants than Daniel Jones has, or they've won the same amount. It's been 3-3. So really, really tough for Daniel Jones. I feel like we sometimes see a little bit of good out of him, but it's just not been the solution. Who I feel worse for in this scenario actually is Drew Lock because he was signed to be the quarterback too, but you can clearly tell the Giants are trying to avoid paying him his full contract by not getting him into the games.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that he could also be if Tommy DeVito ends up doing like trash one of the games, he could end up coming in. And I remember when the Seahawks beat the Eagles, he could maybe go on a stretch if they put him in, but probably gonna start Tommy DeVito.
Now, do you think the Giants are going to draft a quarterback in this year's draft?
Ooh, well, I mean, of course they have all the trash quarterbacks, so I would draft a quarterback.
Yeah.
determining like what pick they have though.
There's a couple of good ones out there. Dylan Gabriel, Shadur Sanders. So I think there's a good chance there. All right. Before we wrap up the show, Xavier, let's go through some of the games. There's a lot of lopsided games I feel like this week, as well as 6 teams that are on bye. So not a ton of games to preview and predict, but let's start with your favorite game from Week 12. Do you have one off the bat right now?
Off the bat, my favorite game is gonna be the Cardinals versus Seahawks because you know that division race is spicy, and I'm gonna take the Seahawks winning,
Wow. Okay.
and Geno Smith is gonna have a good game, 27-20.
Yeah, Gino had such a weird game last week where I feel like against the Niners where he had like some picks, he like was really looking terrible, and then he like turned it on at the very end and came back for them, including that big touchdown run. So I think the Seahawks kind of have some momentum right now. However, the Cardinals are just playing awesome football. They're coming off of a bye. They're going to be well rested. I'm going to take them winning this one 21-16. Okay, let's go through a couple more of these games. Let's first do the Monday Night Football game, Ravens at the Chargers. These are 2 teams that are in the AFC, have a good chance of meeting again in the playoffs later on this season. Who do you have winning this one?
I just think the Ravens are gonna overpower the Chargers offense, even coming off of that loss. I'm gonna say 31-23 Ravens.
Okay, I'm going to take the Chargers. They're at home again. They just beat the Bengals at home. And I feel like the Ravens have a very similarly talented offense to Cincinnati that the Chargers were able to stop, at least in that first half. I'm very confident in this Chargers defense. I think that Justin Herbert's playing really well as well. I'm going to have the Chargers winning this one 27-20. Okay.
Um,
Any other
oh,
games
I know.
that
Yeah. 49ers, Packers.
Oh, that's an interesting one. So the Packers have like a lot better of a record than the 49ers do, especially after the Niners lost, but they're going to be at Lambeau. I don't think it's going to be too snowy or anything like that. Who do you have winning this one?
I'm going to say the Packers are gonna win 24-21. Even though that's kind of like almost a must win for the Niners, I think the Packers are gonna come through.
Okay, I think I'm going to take the Packers as well. They're at home. They're playing really well. Christian Watson had a great game last week. I'm going to have them winning this game 24-17. One more game to cover on this week. Let's go to your team, the Eagles. They're playing the Rams on Sunday Night Football. What are your thoughts? Do you think they got a chance going on the road, or is Matt Stafford going to have himself a great game?
Well, I mean the Rams only beat the Patriots by 6 points, so well, I mean I'm gonna take the Eagles. Let's say 20. I think still gonna be close though. 28-23.
Okay. I mean, I feel like the Rams. I think they're on a bit of a slide actually, right? Because they lost to the Dolphins. Well, then they beat the Patriots, I guess. So, but they haven't looked that good recently. So I think I'm gonna give it to the Eagles as well. Saquon Barkley. I'm rooting for him to win MVP because I like it when non-quarterbacks win the MVP award. So that's gonna do it for our Week 12 previews. Any final words about this week of games, or are you good to wrap up this episode, Xavier?
The Eagles are gonna win again, and peace.
All right. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week in This Week in Football.